Welcome to this deep dive. We're here to really dig into the sources and pull out the key insights for you.
And today we're focusing on the life and, well, the incredible legacy of Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o.
It feels especially important now, doesn't it? Given his recent passing on May 28th, 2025, he was 87.
It really does. A huge loss. And the material we reviewed, it just underlines that he wasn't simply a writer. Not at all.
No, far from it. The sources paint him as, a truly revolutionary thinker, an activist who wasn't afraid to use his words, his art, to challenge power. Colonial power, post-colonial power, all of it.
Exactly. And his impact, it wasn't just confined to Kenya or even Africa. It reshaped literature, inspired people globally.
Right. So our goal here is to walk you through what these sources tell us are the essential parts of his story. His beginnings in Kenya, that huge, brave stance he took on language, and what he leaves behind.
Basically giving you the core takeaways on Ngũgĩ for the material we have.
Okay, let's dive in. Starting right at the beginning. He was born 1938, Limuru, Kenya.
And the sources really emphasize this. His childhood was completely overshadowed by the Mau Mau uprising, that fight against British rule.
Yeah, it wasn't just background history for him, it was formative. It shaped his writing, his politics, fundamentally. You can see it threaded through everything.
And despite those turbulent times, he pursued education. Which, wasn't guaranteed for everyone then. He eventually went to Maker University in Uganda.
Maker. The sources described that as a real hotbed, didn't they? A hub for African intellectuals grappling with independence and identity.
Absolutely. A crucial place at a crucial time. And then later he studied in England at the University of Leeds.
So he had this exposure to both worlds, so to speak. African intellectual circles and European academia.
Right. And the sources suggest that this dual experience didn't just broaden his horizons, it actually sharpened his focus on the need for Africa to tell its own stories. On its own terms.
To reclaim the narrative, basically, away from the colonial perspective.
Precisely. Which leads us perfectly into his emergence as a writer, right?
Exactly. This is where he starts putting those ideas into practice. His first novel, Weep Not, Child, published in 1964.
And the sources highlight this, was a landmark, the first novel in English by an East African writer.
And it tackled that Mau Mau experience head-on, didn't it? The sources say it focused on ordinary people, caught in the middle of that huge historical struggle.
Yeah, the human impact. He followed it up pretty quickly, too. The River Between in 65, A Grain of Wheat in 67.
And these books, they continued blending personal lives with the bigger picture of Kenya's fight for freedom, its political awakening.
They weren't just political statements, though. The sources describe them as rich human narratives set against this backdrop of change.
So by the late 60s, he's really established a major voice, powerful storyteller, sharp social critic.
Definitely. The sources show he was already grappling with the complexities of post-independence Africa through his fiction.
But as the sources make very clear, his work wasn't confined to novels. He moved into direct activism. And things really came to a head in 1977.
Yes, 1977. That's the year he co-wrote the play Nehikan Ndinda.
Which translates as, I will marry when I want.
Right. And crucially, it was performed in his home language, Gikuyu, and staged in an open-air community theater involving local peasants and workers.
And the content. The sources describe it as a fierce critique, really sharp, pointing fingers at the inequalities emerging in Kenya after independence, targeting the new elite.
It hit a nerve, a big nerve. The reaction was immediate.
The play was banned, and Ngũgĩ himself was arrested, detained without trial for over a year.
Just think about that. Imprisoned for a play. It shows the risks he was taking.
And the sources give us that incredible detail about his time inside writing his next novel, Devil on the Cross.
On toilet paper. Prison-issued toilet paper. Because that's all I had.
It's such a powerful image of resistance, isn't it? Just refusing to be silenced.
Absolutely. And the sources pinpoint this period, this time in detention, as the moment he made a profound shift. A really fundamental one.
Ah, yes, the language question. This is central, isn't it?
Totally central. He came out of prison advocating, really forcefully, for African writers to stop writing primarily in European languages, like English or French.
And instead
embrace their own indigenous languages. For him, that meant his mother tongue, Kikuyu.
And the sources explain this wasn't just about, cultural preference or nostalgia. He saw it as political, as decolonization.
Exactly. He argued that colonial languages carried the baggage of colonial power, colonial ways of seeing the world, They weren't neutral tools.
So using them, even to critique colonialism, somehow perpetuated its structures. Is that the idea?
That's a big part of his argument, as presented in the sources. He felt true liberation, intellectual liberation, required thinking and creating in one's own language, naming your own world.
You couldn't be fully free, he argued, if your deepest thoughts and highest art were expressed in the language of your former colonizer.
It's a powerful and, at the time, quite radical argument. It challenged the whole literary establishment.
So after he was released, the political pressure didn't really let up in Kenya.
No. The sources indicate he faced continued harassment. And eventually he went into exile, primarily in the United States.
He landed a position at the University of California, Irvine, right?
That's right. And from there, he just continued writing, teaching, speaking. But exile didn't dilute his message. If anything, it seemed to sharpen it.
And that core message coming through in his later essays, his lectures, was consistently about this link, language and power.
Absolutely. The sources stress how he kept hammering home this idea. Reclaiming indigenous languages is vital for real freedom, not just cultural identity, but actual political and psychological freedom.
He really worked to show how something that seems abstract, like language choice, connects to very real struggles for liberation.
And his influence, it spread far beyond Kenya, far beyond literature even.
The sources talk about his impact on post-colonial studies globally. He really changed the conversation.
He inspired countless writers, scholars, activists, people thinking about their own contexts, their own languages, their own struggles against domination.
And this push for linguistic decolonization, it wasn't just academic. It sparked real-world debates about education policy, language rights, debates that are still very much alive today.
Challenging that dominance of English, French, Portuguese in places where hundreds of other languages are spoken. Whose voice gets heard? In what language?
It's fundamental. And the sources mention the tributes pouring in after his passing from leaders, writers, ordinary people, recognizing him as a giant.
A hero of cultural resistance, a voice for justice. That comes through strongly.
His life, as we see in these sources, is just this incredible story of courage. The courage to speak truth to power again and again.
It really makes you think. As we wrap up this deep dive, Ngũgĩ's life serves as such a powerful reminder that words can be weapons. Ideas can change things, especially when they're wielded in the fight for dignity and self-determination.
We really encourage you, listening to this, to explore his work if you haven't already. Weep Not, Child, A Grain of Wheat, but also his essays like Decolonizing the Mind, whether in English or, if you can, Gikuyu.
Reflect on that lifelong battle he fought for cultural identity, for true freedom. It's a struggle that continues in many forms. Thank you for joining us.
And we'll leave you with this thought, drawing directly from Ngũgĩ's core argument. If language is so deeply tied to power and freedom, what might reclaiming or embracing your own cultural heritage, your own linguistic roots, mean for your sense of identity and liberation today?